and gentlemen, welcome to Woodburn Accountants and Advisors webinar series or workshop series on distribution of goods and services in China. Are you marketing to Chinese consumers? Do you need tips on how to market to the Chinese? Have you registered your brand name? Have you protected your products and services? Are you looking to set up an efficient distribution structure? Are you looking to buy and sell goods in China but are not sure how to do this? Woodburn Accountants and Advisors is offering this series of complimentary webinars on the subject. Our aim and goal after the 4-day workshop series is to provide you with information and tools plus tips to enrich your China business skills and enhance your market entry efforts to achieve success in the market. Today, you have joined us for part 1 of this webinar series workshop on protecting your brand in China. And I'm probably going to be a little bit brash with this very short introduction, but it really is the responsibility of any business owner or hijacker can. So before you scenario that is the most advantageous, before you would even begin internet searches, content downloads, before you register a WeChat account, conduct social media networking, marketing locally in China and abroad on China topics, joining local or even foreign trade shows, do your due diligence and register your IP. So some of you that are probably attending today, you have done all of this. You've joined trade shows, you've traveled to China, you've probably done some marketing and whatnot. If you've already done that, register your IP ASAP. It is extremely important. You don't want to make it easy for anybody to steal your trademark or patent in China. Now, who is this webinar for? This webinar, from my perspective, is ideal for 3 types of individuals that are looking to be doing business in China. The first is what I call the newbie to China. So usually it's people or companies where you are looking for or have already found an opportunity for your business in China and you're looking to gain some education on how to protect your business and obtain some research information on how to create a type of strategy for your business in China. The next stage of people who usually join my webinars are individuals that have startup organizations in China, meaning they have companies that have been established for a period of 1 to 3 years. They've focused all of their attention on their core business, and they're realizing now that they're starting to get into very tricky or delicate situations where perhaps they haven't protected their business properly, and now they need somebody to control it or to help organize it or help them protect what is valuable. And then obviously you have the experienced China hands. So you might be wondering why somebody who's spent maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years in China would be joining such a webinar series. Well, very simply, it's because laws and regulations change quite often, I would say, in China. As some of you might all know, there's the new foreign investment law that just came into implementation on January 1st. So all of this has an impact on protecting your IP, on developing business models. So even if you have had a long-term experience in China, joining these webinars is just a way to get new, maybe fresh ideas or new understandings of how to continue your business successfully and to grow your business. What I would love to know from all of you, so please, again, interact with me. Tell me who you are. Are you a newbie? Are you a startup? Are you an experienced China hand? Are you just here to learn and educate yourselves? Maybe you don't even have a business and you just want to learn. Just type it into the chat section and let me know who you are. It just gives me an understanding of who's joining in today's webinar. So how the webinar works from my perspective. First of all, I generally educate and teach. And sometimes I will ask you questions where I hope you will interact with me and add them into the chat section of the chat box. Again, please be interactive. Use this opportunity. Ask questions at any point. I will answer those questions, or I will answer those questions throughout the presentation and I will stay on during the Q&A to also answer those questions. Make sure that this time that you spend here today is valuable to you. We will be online for about 60 minutes, if not 70 minutes, depending on the amount of Q&A. So use this time to learn from each other and to learn from myself in terms of giving you the advice you may need on how to protect your IP in China. We do have quite a bit to cover, so I will be looking at, how do you define a trademark? How can you do searches? What is the first to file system? Considerations for registering your trademark? What are trademark hijackers, IP squatters? What is important for new market entrants to understand? And what should generally be your trademark strategy in China? So I think the biggest question to ask is ultimately, why should you be concerned by protecting your brand in China? Well, I mean, if you don't know the answer to this, then you haven't been really reading the news and watching the media outlets. But very simply, it's because there are people who do things in bad faith in China. They can be known as IP squatters, they can be known as IP hijackers, or very simply, it could be people who even work directly with you. So it could be your suppliers, your customers, your agents, your employees, people who want to see you fail in the Chinese market. So it could be absolutely anyone who wants to do this, even random strangers in the street. Okay, if you are a brand, and today I'm not talking about the big fashion brands and all of this. I want to talk to you as an SME. Why is it important to protect your brand? If you are a family-owned business, as my company is, we are a family-owned business, and we never placed emphasis on our trademark. When someone does finally take it from you and you have no idea who they are, they're a complete stranger in another province in China. So I'm just relating, it has happened to me in the past, where a complete stranger in a complete province far away from China registered our trademark without letting us know, and we had to completely redefine our brand. That takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of explanation because we were on the market with a certain name for a certain number of years. And you have to make a decision. Do you buy someone out for that mark, or do you take responsibility and rebrand? So you've got to make a decision on how valuable your brand is today and how much you want to use that in the Chinese market and protect it. So why am I able to help you? Well, I've gone through it myself. I've made the mistakes in China. I've gone through the experience of having someone, a complete stranger, take our old trademark, register it. At the time we wanted to, mind you. Funnily enough, in our story, they had registered just 2 weeks prior to us, and we only found that out 6 months later. So that's part of the trademark applications process. You don't know everything from the get-go. I've gone through it myself. I know how to prevent this. Just a bit of background about myself. My name is Christina Coluccia. I'm the head of business advisory at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. I am a leading expert on inbound investment in China. I've been in the corporate services sector in China for the last 16 years. I've written countless publications on how to do things right in China on a variety of different aspects associated with inbound investment into the market. And I am now a creator of the China Roadmap program, which I will be touching on at the end of today's presentation, which highlights what your roadmap should look like if you want to be successful in the market. And this China Roadmap is something that's useful for both newbies, startups, as well as experienced hands in China. Something just, if you enjoy this webinar series and you want to continue to learn and be educated on China and how to make things work, please do subscribe to our weekly e-campaign. The first e-campaign is going to go out next Monday. Usually there's all the updates on upcoming webinar series, updates on new articles and publications. And you can also follow either myself or the company on LinkedIn. And we also have a YouTube page where you can look at past recordings, presentations, and topics. So what is considered a trademark in China? So I'm going to use Woodburn as an example for this. So I'm just going to leave it at that page for the moment. So what is considered a trademark in China? Well, any visual sign, if it can be used to distinguish the goods or service of a person or legal entity or an organization. It can include any word, design, letters of an alphabet, numerals, three-dimensional symbols, combinations of colors, and it can be a combination of all of this, and it can be filed for registration. So ultimately, in summation to that beautiful paragraph, which I took from the dictionary, a trademark is actually either a name or a symbol that represents your brand or your company. Now, Woodburn Accountants and Advisors, you can see on the top left-hand side of the slide, is the symbol plus the words Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. When registering a trademark, you can decide to do one of three things or all of three things. One, just register the logo, the symbol, which is the WB in a circle. You can register just the words, Woodburn Accountants and Advisors, or you can register the entire thing, which is the logo plus the words Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. Now, if you want to fully protect yourself 100%, and each of these things has a value to you, then you would want to protect, you would want to do three applications, one just for the symbol, one just for the words, and one for the combination of the symbol and the words together. You have to decide on what is the importance to you for all of this. In terms of Woodburn Accountants and Advisors, what was extremely important to us was Woodburn. Accountants and Advisors, you know, one day we might eliminate that. If we become famous enough, we might not actually need it. But what is critical to us as a brand is the word Woodburn, because that's what people will associate to us. The symbol is important, but it's not important enough for us to consider the cost for the trademark registration. So there are costs that are associated. When we started off, we had a very tight budget. So at that point in time, the symbol was something that we did not consider a priority. Now we might. But again, you know, what is very critical to us is the word Woodburn. So in general, what you need to all decide on is when you look at your brand name or you have a symbol, what is so critical to you? And for those of you that are trading, because we're just a service company, but for those of you that are physically trading, it's thinking also about what brand is on your packaging, what is on your clothing if you're in retail. You know, how is it displayed? Because if you're using the symbol plus the words on packaging, on clothing, on a variety of different things, then you may want to consider doing the combination as part of your strategy. So who should be registering their trademark in China? And this is where I laugh, because a lot of people who have not been properly educated on IP, certainly those people that are not lawyers, but people that are actually in the business, trading, or operational, many of them believe if they are a service-oriented company, they don't have to register their brand. And on top of that, those people that are trading with China, the conclusion or what we've seen a lot is that most people that are just sourcing in China or exporting from China, they feel like because they're not selling into China, they don't have to register their trademark. But I want to tell you, whatever you do in China, you trade with China. That can be export, import, domestic. If you manufacture in China and you're just manufacturing, you still want to register your trademark because you will probably have that brand on some form of packaging. It'll be on some form of carton, or it'll be on some product. There will be your brand somewhere, okay? Could even be on the face of your building if you're renting a manufacturing facility. Even if you are a representative office and you're not physically trading, you're just representing your home office, you want to be able to protect your brand. Even if you're a temporary liaison office, a temporary marketing office, even if you don't have any entity in China, but you are doing business with the Chinese, or you are not yet, but about to start doing business with China, you want to protect your brand. So in conclusion, everyone doing business in China needs to protect their brand. They need to register their IP. They need to make sure that this is safe. And I say this because no matter what you're doing, and I'll provide case studies on this, no matter what you're doing, you want to make sure nobody takes that away from you, okay? If you are a small family-owned business and there have been 2 or even 3 generations of people, of family members in your company, and they have built a brand for 2 to 3 years, you want to protect that when you go to a new market. So you want to make sure it is protected when you go into China. Now, as a first step, what you want to do when you go into the Chinese market, and now I'm educating you, so this is something you could easily do today, tomorrow, you could ask somebody to do it for you. You should check or search the trademark database before filing for any registration. So what this means is that the China Trademark Office has a database, a trademark database of all trademarks that have been registered. Now, the online database, unfortunately, you will, if you're living abroad or based abroad, you may not have access to that database. You need a good day, or you might need a VPN, or you're not always going to be able to get online into that. But generally, if you type in CTMO or China Trademark Office database, you should find the link, and you can easily go in. There is an English section, or last time I checked, there was an English section, and you can easily check if your mark is available, or if any mark is available or registered. Okay, so it's important to be able to check this. Now, I just want to mention one thing here, that the online database is not always up to date, and I say this out of personal experience. The online database is updated every so often. So, you can have a situation where you check the database, you feel that nobody has registered that name in your specific classes and subclasses. There will be a kind of guarantee that you will have success in terms of registering the mark. And lo and behold, 6 months later, you find out someone has registered 2 weeks before you, which you would never have found out by checking the online trademark database. So in this instance, this is something you can do yourself, but you may also want to have someone go and check the trademark office personally to check the current filings, to make sure really that when you do the application, it's all safe and secure. Now, the reason why it's important is because China follows what's called a first-to-file system. So the first-to-file system basically means that anyone can register a trademark, a logo, a name, irrespective of whether it's owned by someone else in another jurisdiction. Okay, if it hasn't been registered in China yet, anybody can register it. Okay, so anyone can basically lay claim to it, right? So that means that your trademark could be legally owned by another party, leaving you locked out of China from doing any form of business. Okay, so it is very important to make sure that you are the one who is the first to file. Now, just some bureaucratic or administrative information. A trademark, once registered, is valid for up to 10 years, with the renewal process usually being requested to begin 6 months prior to the expiration date. The application takes between 12 to 18 months to complete. So it's not a short period of time. So what does this mean when I say that it takes 12 to 18 months to complete? It is a process, which I will go into detail on another slide later on. But the biggest question that I do get in those situations is, if I have filed, and mind you, the minute you have filed, it does not mean that you know whether you have been the first to file, and I say this again out of personal experience, you don't know if you've been the first to file. It usually takes about 6 months to know what the outcome is and who has been the first to file. So if someone has registered 1 day before you, 2 weeks before you, 1 month before you, you won't know that until 6 months later, which is really a waste of time. So the issue is why everyone promotes and advises. The minute you start doing something with China, you want to register your trademark. Even if, after a year of research, you realize China's not a market for you, at least your trademark is there, it's done, it's registered, you've got it for 10 years. And I just want to emphasize also the costs associated to register one mark in one class is not expensive. Obviously, if you want to do the full protection, it can add up. But if you just want to do one mark in one class, God, it is relatively cheap when you look at the long-term scheme of things, okay? But, the question I do get is, okay, if I have filed, can I start using that brand name in the market? Well, probably you've already started using it anyhow. The issue will arise whether you can continue to use it if someone hasn't filed or not. And in that scenario, you have to weigh out the decisions. Do I wait for marketing? Don't I wait for marketing? Do I start transacting? How do I start transacting? There's a lot of questions because you don't want to halt your business for a period of 12 to 18 months. Having said that, though, I do know a few companies that have halted their business in China in order to be completely secure with their trademarks. But that's again an internal decision that you have to make, whether you wait or you don't wait and you start transacting. What are the considerations that you have to make for registering your trademark? So the first consideration is really understanding, is your trademark available, right? So do the search. You can do it by yourself. Go to the CTMO database, do a preliminary search and see what the outcome is. The second choice or decision you have to make is, what do you want to register? So when you do the search, what are you actually looking for? Are you looking for a name, a logo, a symbol? In what classes or subclasses are you also looking to go under? And then ultimately, if that all looks good and positive, which entity is going to own that trademark? Okay, is it going to be a parent company? Is it going to be a holding company? So there's quite a few things you need to consider when registering your trademark. But again, these are not long considerations, right? The first is knowing, is it available? The second is knowing, what do you want to actually register? What entity is going to own it ultimately? And what classes and subclasses are you going to register in? So do your research, okay? Have meetings internally. How do you define your brand? How are you going to register your brand? Under which entity are you going to register your brand? You might even want to start thinking at that point about licensing agreements. So if you are able to register your brand, is it going to be a form of repatriation of funds at a later date? There's a lot that you can consider just on the topic of trademark and IP. And I'm more geared in this presentation about trademark versus looking at patents or copyrights, because there it goes really into technical details where you really want to then work with an IP lawyer to go into those technicalities. But these are things that you definitely want to pinpoint and think about when you're talking about trademark. And the next is looking at trademark hijacking. So what does that actually mean? So trademark hijacking is when a local business registers a trademark, which is owned by another company in another jurisdiction. There's no relationship at all between the two companies, between the local business and the overseas business. Relationships start when either the local business has registered the mark, has similar products suddenly with the overseas company, and now demands licensing fees or even sues for infringement when the original products or services enter the Chinese market. So what you've got to be careful here are these sneaky, and these, I say local Chinese business registers because it can also be foreigners based in China who do this, mind you. I don't want to pinpoint the blame just on the Chinese. I've also seen a lot of foreigners based in China who do this type of thing. So it's just someone who's doing something in bad faith, where they register a mark, maybe because they've seen it abroad on a business trip or on a holiday. They register the mark in China because it's available. And now they start producing products that are similar, lower quality, and they're demanding licensing fees because you're interested in the Chinese market and you want to go in that market, right? So what is the consequence of this type of infringement? Well, basically, hijacking can tarnish the image of the brand, especially if that local business is selling inferior goods, providing inferior services, all under the same brand. So you've got to be really careful of those type of people. And you know, there are bad people all over the place. This can happen in the US, it can happen in the UK, it can happen anywhere in the world. It's just that the media highlights this more often in China. And, you know, like I said, you can have even an employee do this behind your back. So you just have to be careful that, you know, you're registering this properly and in time. IP squatters are people who basically sit on something for a long period of time, meaning they've probably registered something 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago before even China was a part of your decision-making process. And they hold it against you at the point that you do want to go in. So it is really a serious problem for, you know, late market entrants that are looking to go into the Chinese market. And obviously, these IP squatters are doing it in bad faith. The only issue is that you need to prove that they're doing it in bad faith. In addition to that, the majority of these IP squatters are generally not using the brand for anything, meaning they've just registered it. They're not marketing it locally. They're not using the brand anywhere. If you can prove that they're not using it anywhere, then you can actually, through the courts, win your mark back. So that's kind of an advantage if it's an IP squatter that takes your mark versus an IP hijacker. I think one of the things that the Chinese government is trying to do, obviously with all the US-China trade war and how it all kind of started with the fact that China is a cheat, they steal brands and steal marks and they do all of this business. The local courts in China are getting much more strict in the fact that they want to help businesses protect their brands. And they're doing this not only for the foreign investors that are going into China, but they're also doing it for the Chinese investors that are going abroad. So they're also trying to encourage Chinese businesses, register your brands in China so that your distributors overseas don't do it on your behalf. You know, it's a two-way street in the end of the day when you're looking at both inbound investment and outbound investment. Everyone should be registering their marks in all the jurisdictions that they're doing business in. But ultimately, what the Chinese government is doing is they have developed specific IP courts. So there's one court in Guangzhou, Shanghai, Beijing, and I know that in several of the tier 2 cities, these things are developing as well. In addition to that, they are trying to create a blacklist. So as IP hijackers and squatters are becoming more and more, are being revealed, so to speak, there is a blacklist where you can find out that data. So if you do a search and you see that your mark has been already registered, you can get some background information on the company or person that owns that mark. The only downside is that IP squatters and hijackers are not dumb. Many of them don't register as individuals. They will use holding entities to do it. So it's very hard to track who's the ultimate beneficiary of that holding company. So, you know, you start doing something and sometimes you hit an obstacle or a rock because you can't get any further. So it gets into tricky situations. But the government is trying to halt the whole IP hijacking and squatter issue in China. And they're doing quite well on that. So if somebody owns your IP in China, what does this actually mean for you? And this slide generally shocks people because I think this is maybe the slide that is the wake-up call for everyone in terms of understanding why it's so important to register their IP. So if somebody has registered your IP in China, your trademark in China, what does this mean? Well, one, it means it is illegal for you to sell any goods or services bearing that trademark in China. It's illegal for you to do it. You're not allowed to do it. It is illegal for you to manufacture or source goods from China bearing that trademark, unless you have permission from the IP owner to do that. It is illegal for you to provide a service locally in China bearing that trademark. It is illegal as long as that IP, and I just want to emphasize, as long as that IP is registered in the class and subclasses that you are in, okay? It is illegal for you to market yourself in China bearing that trademark. And this I will go into much greater detail on tomorrow. But it is illegal for you to market yourself in China bearing that trademark. Likely that any goods you do manufacture in China will be seized by Chinese customs as counterfeit goods. It is possible for the Chinese registrant to freely manufacture goods under the trademark and export them to any other country where you have not registered your trademark, effectively taking business that should be yours. So be aware of this slide. This is sometimes the slide that really is the wake-up call for everyone. So, if somebody has owned your IP in China, you legally cannot do any of this. You cannot trade. You cannot do business at all in China. All right. If you do, the authorities and the IP owner basically sues you. The courts can take your business away from you. So you've got to be aware of that. Okay. This is why you should be doing it immediately. So what should be your trademark strategy in China? As mentioned earlier, your first step should be to do your research, right? So either conduct your own search online or have a provider do a search for you in the classes and subclasses that you want to register in. You just need to know what marks you want to register. You need to know which subclasses you want to register in to know whether they're available. Now I put this here specifically so people realize in the service sector. When you look at the classes and subclasses list, and again, you can find this online. You go to Google, you type in classification of goods for IP registration in China, and you will get the class list, okay? There are 45 classes in total. Class 1 to 34 is for the classification of products and goods. Classes 35 to 45 are for services, which is why even if you are in the service sector, you should be registering your mark, okay? Very hard lesson that I learned. Don't want that to befall anyone else. Now, generally speaking, if you are in the service sector, you probably will just be within class 35 and 45. If you are trading or manufacturing in China, you may have certain, or you may want to register in some service classes, because if, for example, you are providing technical service, after-sales service, if you are marketing, these are all service-related things that are under the classifications of services. So you may want to have certain classes be defined specifically under classes 35 to 45. If there are no problems and you've done your search, so generally, let me go backtrack a little bit. So if you do an online search in your database, in the online database, probably you'll find that several marks come up within one search. So this is where the dilemma arises when you're doing your preliminary research. Even if you do it yourself online or you have an external party do it for you, there will never be a guarantee of success provided. Or let me rephrase that. Nobody should be giving you a guarantee of success. Because one, you don't know whether someone has registered a day, a week, 2 weeks prior. Again, I say this out of personal experience. We had an IP lawyer register ours. There was no way for them to be able to find that out at the point of registration. Another thing that you have to be aware of is that you might have, well, let's use Woodburn, okay? I'm going to use Woodburn as an example. So our name is Woodburn. Now, for example, let's say somebody has a brand name that is Wadburn, meaning there's only one O in wood. So ours is Woodburn, the other one is Wadburn. Wadburn, if they would want to register tomorrow in the classes that we are in, most likely they will certainly have our name pop up. And if they use a lawyer to do the external checking, the lawyer will probably say to them, I have a feeling you will only have a 10% chance of success of getting your mark registered, even though the spelling is completely different. One is Wadburn and one is Woodburn, okay? But the similarity is too close and the pronunciation is too close that most likely the CTMO will reject it. So when you do your search, and especially if you get an external party to do that search, most likely they will produce a report for you highlighting all the logos, marks that are similar in the classes and subclasses that you want to register in. And then hopefully by the end, they will give you a percentage of success if you register your mark. That percentage is something you should really be looking at, because if there is only 10% of success, you should think about creating a new brand for the Chinese market. There's no way your brand is going to get registered. If you have a 90% of success, you go ahead, go and register. If you have a 50-50 chance of success, my suggestion would be try and register, have a backup plan in case it doesn't work out, okay? So definitely think about all of these things when you're doing your research and looking at the research report, and communicate with these external parties about what is the best next step for you. Now, if there are no problems, then file as soon as possible. It's easy, it's quick to file. What takes a long time is the physical registration application process. If, however, you find that somebody is in the process of filing for your trademark, or somebody has already registered, then you should think about getting an IP lawyer, particularly if you want to maintain your brand. And why do I say to get an IP lawyer? Because you might find that somebody has or is an IP squatter or a IP hijacker, and they've registered in bad faith, and you can sue them for that and gain your brand name back. Generally, the rule of thumb is if someone has not used your brand, has registered your brand, but not used it for a period of 3 years in China, in terms of marketing and publicity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then you can go to the courts and ask for your brand back, okay? Otherwise, the other solution is you contact the owner of that brand and you say, I want to buy it off from you. And this is where risk comes in, because you have no idea at what price point they're going to want to sell it to you. And that's where you get into a very tricky situation. So you want to make sure you have a lawyer to guide you through that entire process, okay? Now I want to show you how easy it is to register your trademark, and I sincerely hope that this pushes you all to register it. So you need a simple signed power of attorney. The power of attorney is for somebody who will physically go to the CMO and do the application. You need a duly completed trademark search or registration order. It's more a registration order form, highlighting the classes and subclasses, highlighting the marks. You need a soft copy of the marks in JPEG format in the colors that you want to register in. So you can register black and white, you can register in color. And if it is the color, then generally you have to provide the, oh, I forgot the name, like the Pantone color, the specific number of that color of your mark. You need a copy of the identity proof of the applicant. So if it's an individual, it's a passport. If it's a corporate entity, it's a business license. You also need a priority document when priority is claimed. So a priority document is something that can prioritize your application, but then you would need to provide additional proof, which I've not listed here, to claim that your mark is a priority, it's urgent, da 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 da. I'll be honest with you, if you're a small, medium-sized company, that might not necessarily be something you can use. To do the actual application, you file it with the China Trademark Office. The Trademark Office will do their how do you call that? They will do basically a thorough manual check, and I mean manual check that the trademark is, there's no other same or similar trademark in those classes and subclasses, okay? So if you have no issues, then the trademark will be accepted for registration. It will be published in the Trademark Gazette, where people still have the opportunity to object. And if there is no objection, then a registration certificate will be issued by the CTMO. As you can see, there are various stages where you can get caught out. So for example, in my personal experience, I got caught out already in stage number 2. Stage number 2 alone can take anywhere between 6 to 8 months to complete, because it is a manual check. The Trademark Gazette alone usually takes about 3 months. So this is what I would tell people in terms of timing. If you register your trademark and you have passed point 2, then most likely, and now the mark is in the Trademark Gazette for a period of 3 months, then most likely you are able, or you have the ability to continue, or you can not continue, you can start marketing your products and services, okay? Trademark Gazette is pretty much a guarantee that everything is A-okay. And I say pretty much a guarantee because in all of this, there is no guarantee that can be formally provided. If at point 2, you have been completely rejected, that's the point where you have to think about rebranding. So it's so it's obviously important to have a backup plan. Next slide. Don't think, just do. Preemption by action is your best and least expensive form of protection. Just do it. Just register it, even if you don't even know what your China strategy is, or even if you don't know what is going to be the next steps, okay? Just do it. And I want to highlight at this point, what is the China roadmap? And I'm going to be using this as an example and use case studies of why it's so important to follow these steps. The China roadmap is something that I've created based on my observations of companies and clients' journeys in the China market, as well as my own journey in the Chinese market. So, I've created this China roadmap for companies to actually see what it means and what it takes to be successful, okay? Because what I generally see by most companies is they incorporate in China, they leave that company on its own, they never travel over anymore, they leave it to its own devices, never providing any support from the head office. And lo and behold, there's either fraud that occurs, non-compliance, employee steals the business away, steals clients away, money is stolen, a variety of things can happen. So I just want to show the China roadmap to kind of show what your China journey should actually look like, okay? So what does the China roadmap look like? It looks like this. So it means that you start off with an opportunity. You have an opportunity in China. And there are 3 milestones that you have to look at when you're looking at an opportunity in China. One is you've got to educate yourself. You've got to do your research. And then you got to create a strategy and a budget. The next milestone after that would be implementation. So developing an ecosystem, protection in all forms, and developing system processes that can help you understand how it works in China. And last but not least is the last or third milestone is growth. So you've got to look at your numbers. You've got to be able to analyze and read them so that ultimately you can focus on the business and grow, okay? So this is for me what the China roadmap entails. And I want to look at the first milestone, which is opportunity. Is there an opportunity in China for your company, for your product, for your services? What is that opportunity and what can you do to understand this level of opportunity? So the first method that you can do is you can educate yourself on the market. And I'm honestly going to say, better than appointing someone to do research for you, travel to China yourself, okay? Network, see different cities, meet potential partners. Get something out of that trip yourself to understand how China works and to evaluate whether that opportunity that you see is really there. The next step then, after you've done that first trip and you've kind of educated yourself, and I don't want to just say one trip, do several trips, is then kind of simultaneously, separately, do research on your sector and your industry. And you can do that either by, again, outsourcing to a provider that physically does the research or hiring someone on the ground to do the research on your behalf, okay? And there's such a variety of research that should be done that people don't do. They just do general market research studies to kind of evaluate opportunity, yes or no. But there's so much more in-depth work that should be done, whether it's market segmentation, product testing, advertised testing, satisfaction and loyalty awareness, brand awareness, pricing research, competitor benchmarking. This is just, a list I've thrown together of what I think is important. Now, not all of this has to happen from the get-go, but these are the types of research that actually should be done. Concrete research where you get concrete results as to know what the next step is. The next step is all positive, then, and once you have, actual data and information on hand, then you're much more aware if the opportunity is a real opportunity, because you'll know if there's a return on investment. And at that point, you can move to the third item in this milestone, which is developing a strategy or business plan and creating a budget. And what I want to emphasize with strategy and budget is just saying, don't think short term, think long term. But when you understand and you've educated yourself on the market, you have much more ability to protect yourself. Now, this is a great example of a German company. They are in locks, as you can see. So they manufacture and produce and distribute locks in China. And their strategy from very early on was to use distributors in the Chinese market who would either import from overseas, from the overseas manufacturers, or buy from the local manufacturers and then sell. Over time, the German company became very selective. They found a distributor that they really liked working with that was also bringing in much better results. And they knowingly asked them to register their trademark. So, I mean, this was all knowingly. They did it. Because at that time, their goal was not to go into the market themselves. It was to always outsource it to a distributor. So they said to the distributor, you can do it, without even realizing that what they could have done was own the trademark from Germany and just license it to the distributor, which would have been a much more ideal scenario. Now, as time went on, you're looking at 20 years down the line, they started investigating things themselves, saying, oh, we could probably do marketing better. Let's set up a rep office. So after a few years of having a rep office, they realized, you know what? We could have a much better and more efficient and effective supply chain. Let's set up our own trading company and take the distributor out. Well, one thing they had forgotten about was the trademark. They can't set up a trading company and distribute products with that name. They don't own it. So then came in the lawyers, because as you can imagine, the distributor lost face because business now was going to be eliminated. And they had to pay an exorbitant amount to get their mark back. So this was just simply poor planning. They didn't think about short, long-term strategy. They didn't talk to IP lawyers about what might be the best strategy for their brand name. They didn't think about any of that. So doing the research really is creating new knowledge and understanding of what would be a great short and long-term strategy for you, just associated with IP alone. The next step is implementation. Okay, this is the second milestone. And here, I'm not talking about necessarily incorporating an entity. I am talking that whatever strategy you've decided upon for China, you're going to implement that strategy. And that could mean doing things directly from the HQ. It could mean having distributors or agents locally. It could mean having your own structure. There's so many different choices alone with that. The first item I want everyone to think about, because this is so critical in China, it's developing your ecosystem, developing your network, okay? And I don't mean just developing your network of suppliers and distributors and people that help with the supply chain. I'm talking about people that can advise you. I think one of the best parts about China is that anybody wants to talk about their experiences and their war stories. I do. I have a lot of fun talking about the mistakes I've done in China. And I want people to learn from them. But anyone else, they will have the same. They want to talk about it. They want to get it out of their system. So develop an ecosystem of partners, whether it is accountants, lawyers, trademark lawyers, just generally people within maybe your chambers of commerce. Network as much as you can, because the more people you have in your ecosystem, the more people that can help you if you get into a mess, the more people that can advise you, the more people that can give you information about how to do things better with your own structure and your own organization. The next is protection. You want to protect yourself. I mean, all of these things kind of have to happen simultaneously, to be quite honest with you. But you want to protect yourself. And obviously, you want to protect yourself with your IP, but you also want to protect yourself in so many other ways. You want to have protection with corporate governance. You should be doing due diligence procedures. You should make sure you get a lawyer to review contracts, any types of contracts. You should have a tax advisor review those contracts. You should look at invoicing processes. And this all then comes into system processes. Because developing system processes, whether they are based out of the headquarter, based out of your own entity in China, it is important to know what is right and wrong with developing trade flows. So that if you do meet a partner that is suggesting something that is not to your norm, you know, okay, I have to ask someone whether this is correct, whether it is legal, and whether I can do this with this partner or not. Doing something without getting advice first can cost you quite a lot in terms of dollar signs, emotion, and ultimately whether your business stays in China or not. So remember these 3 steps in terms of implementation. The next step, let me then go on to a case study. So this is where, for me, IP became something actually very, very serious. We had a client manufacturing in China consumer products, all different types of consumer products. They were a very well-known brand in Europe. And what they did is they manufactured in China. They had I believe between 70 and 80, 85 different suppliers for the different types of products that they produced. All the suppliers would put the products into cartons so that it was ready to be shipped to the retailers direct. It was all for export. So you see these cartons on the slide, basically huge brand name on the cartons, ready to be shipped out. What happened was that they had a falling out with a supplier who they just didn't want to work with anymore. Quality wasn't to the level they wanted. Prices were being increased consistently. So they just wanted to terminate the relationship and work with the other suppliers that they had. Now this supplier, in bad faith, and because they lost face, registered their trademark in China. It was not registered because this client thought, if I'm not selling into China, I don't need to register my mark. However, this supplier registered their trademark in China, but not only did they register their mark with the CTMO, they also registered the mark with the Customs Bureau, which means that when the first shipment went out of China by another supplier, by someone else, through any port, because once you register through customs, it does not matter the port that it's being exported from, it got halted. And more suppliers got their shipments halted. The big question was, why? Why can't you send it out? And it was because the client hadn't registered their mark in China, the supplier had. Customs got the notification that it is illegal for you to ship your products out when someone else owns the mark and you have not received permission to do so. So you can imagine what happened. No product could be shipped out. They had to actually then very quickly decide what to do, which means they emptied all the cartons. There was no mark on the products themselves, and they just shipped out with the marks like that in empty cartons, and they did the cartoning very quickly in Europe. However, not ideal scenario, right? You're disrupting the entire supply chain. And finally, they were able to prove that it was done in bad faith, but it did halt their business for a period of 6 to 8 months. And the big question for them was, should we just rebrand in Europe? I mean, that was one of the first questions that came up, but this was a brand that had been developed for years, tens of years, right? You spent so much marketing on it. What do? You have to then disrupt your whole supply chain. So it is very critical for people to educate themselves on what they can and can't do if they don't register their mark in China. Now, the third milestone is growth, right? It's about building momentum in the Chinese market, right? So this is usually the slide that I have for my experienced hands in China. So the first is numbers. If you have your own company in China, are you checking the numbers? Are you understanding them? Are you questioning them? Can you read them? If you're doing things from your HQ, what do the numbers look like? Have you created a separate P&L for your China business? Analyze, and this is something that really irritates me. Nobody reads their reports. Okay, this is something that now I'm actually forcing clients to do with me because nobody reads them. Or in cases where you're in a joint venture, nobody is asking to get a translation of it because all they're doing is getting reports in Chinese. So, you've got to be able to analyze and analyze and read the numbers that you're getting. So do you have the ability to translate? Can you understand what the data is telling you? Because don't forget, in China, you're following the Chinese GAAP accounting system, so there are differences. Are you sitting with your finance team to go through so that the decision can be made for what the next step is? And this is then focus. If you can't, first of all, if numbers aren't produced, or if numbers are produced and you can't read or analyze them, how do you know where to go from there? How do you know what your next step is? How can you be conscious of what your next step is, right? You want to be able to focus on the core of your business and know if you can move forward and you can grow. You cannot, nobody can make decisions if they don't know what the numbers look like. And obviously there are a lot of people out there that aren't number strong. They're not, they maybe aren't finance people, etc. But you've ultimately got to understand whether you're running out of money, how does your cash flow look? Can you do more marketing and advertising? Is revenue going up or is revenue going down? Is it stable? Why? You've got to ask all of these questions. So you've got to make sure you have the ability to focus and grow. And usually, if you're able to do that, you will grow in the right direction because you're making the right decisions for your business. So I just want to close off on this one slide. Pay attention to everything and the truth will reveal itself. If you have your own entity in China and you just ignore it and you don't pay attention to it, then you won't discover cases of fraud, which happens. And sometimes even local employees don't even realize they're doing it because they haven't been given the right operational guidelines. Case study of just an Australian company who set up a JV in Beijing, didn't check anything after a period of for 3 years, they didn't do anything. They got financial reports in Chinese, never raised any questions. They figured that if they got them, everything was going A-okay. But then they started questioning, why aren't we profitable yet after 3 years? They went in to do a health check internal audit, and what arose was that, first of all, nobody was asking questions about the financials. That's just their own mistake. And the second was, it was discovered that monthly transfers were going from the owner of the Chinese owner to the bank account of the brother of the Chinese owner on a monthly basis. The brother was never employed by the company. It was just a way of getting money out. And on top of that, lo and behold, the JV partner, the Chinese partner, had registered the trademark of the Australian partner without informing them, all in breach of contracts and good faith. But it took them 3 years. 3 years to discover this. 3 years of your business. So obviously, in this scenario, the marriage ended in divorce. There was quite a hefty cost to the company. You have the investment capital, you've got 3 years of loss, and then ultimately the divorce itself cost quite a considerable amount of money. But what is the ultimate loss? The ultimate loss is the reputation of the name of the Australian company. So pay attention to your business, understand what is going on, educate yourself, okay? So just to reemphasize the roadmap again, opportunity, implementation, growth, make sure you research, educate yourselves. On the implementation phase, ecosystem and protection are really things that are the key in that area. And on growth, look at the numbers. So just 4 ways of how I can help you protect yourself. One is I'm happy to advise you. We can also do initial trademark searches if you like. We can also do trademark registrations. And last but not least, something you're probably not thinking about right now, but should, is if you do register your trademark, setting up licensing agreements to get capital out of China for the use of the trademark. So these are all things we can do associated with the trademark and the protection of the trademark. Now, I just want to tell people, you know, if you want to book a strategy session with me, more than happy to sit down, advise you. It's free of charge. I'm going to put the link to this right here into the chat section so that if you are keen, you can set up a call with me. Next week is Chinese New Year, but I'll still be available to talk. So please, you know, the link is in the chat section. Please go ahead, click on it, and set up a session. So let's go ahead and start with a couple of questions in order to, let's go ahead and start with a couple of sessions that have come in. If I don't get to all of the questions, because I'm realizing now it's already, we've hit the 60-minute mark, so I'm just going to spend maybe 5-6 minutes on questions. I will reach out to you if I haven't answered your questions by the end of today. So don't worry, I will be getting to you on that. But just a couple of questions that have come in. The first one is from Mary. Why bother? Why bother? There's just going to be a squatter or hijacker who will steal it anyway, plus the government won't really protect me. Look, I know that this webinar workshop can be quite negative at times, and it can seem quite daunting in terms of what to do. But I just want to emphasize, preemption by action is going to cost you a lot less. So register your mark. You know, you want to make sure your mark is registered. You want to be able to say, I can go into China at any point because my mark is registered and it is safe. Now, to say that the government won't protect you, I think is misleading. And I think it's misleading because the media kind of portrays that. I don't want you to look at the Fortune 500 multinational companies that are out there that are going through trademark issues. You want to look at companies that are like yourself, okay? That's point number one. And point number two is, you know, if someone has taken your mark in bad faith or is using your mark in bad faith, meaning you've registered your mark, but somebody is out there that's using it, get a lawyer, protect yourself. These are things that can be very damaging to your reputation. So do go out there and protect yourself. I do remember very long time ago, so this is probably now 10, 12 years ago, I had a competitor at that time that took my symbol, the symbol that we had in those days, and in those days mine was blue, and they took exactly the same symbol and made it red. The words next to it in terms of company name were very different, but the symbol in itself, we had never registered it at that time, and even if we would have registered it, we would have done it in our own color, so you know, there was similarity, but maybe they would have gotten approved. We didn't bother ourselves too much about it because we emphasized more the name of our brand at that time, not the symbol. And I did get asked a lot of questions. Oh, are you associated with that company? Because the symbol is so similar, it's just a different color. We never pursued it. We never sued them. We never did anything with them. It just wasn't our intention to do it because, you know, what are we going to do? There's ways of explaining. However, if you're selling a product and they're selling an inferior product and using the same brand name, fight for it. And nowadays, the regulations in China and the government in China are trying to create a fair playing field. And the foreign investment law, which just came into fruition Jan 1, is all about fair playing field between domestic companies and foreign investors in China. So I have to believe that that is what they're aiming for and what the goal will be. So I think when you're talking about taking someone to court in China or the government not protecting you, they are. I truly believe they are. The next question is, do I need a lawyer to register a trademark or can I do it myself? So my recommendation would be to use a third party, primarily because if there are objections, rejections, questions that come back, you want to work with somebody that has the experience to know how to answer back to the CTMO. In short, the answer is yes, you can do it by yourself. You gather all the documents that I've listed, you go to a CTMO office, you submit everything, But the issue is then, how do you deal with the communication ongoing? And are you able to counter them and negotiate with them effectively ongoing? Oh, the next question is quite good. So the next question I do want to touch on, because maybe some of you have never heard of this. I have heard of the Madrid Protocol. Is that an option for China? So the Madrid Protocol is related to intellectual property. There are a number of countries that have signed up to the Madrid Protocol. China is one of them. What this means is you can file a application for trademark registration under the Madrid Protocol under specific countries that you wish. So for example, United States, China, Thailand, I believe Vietnam, there are a bunch of different countries that are in there. And it will be one filing, one application. Now, my only concern with the Madrid Protocol, and I say this related to China because I don't know how it relates to other countries locally, but when it relates to China, it's the following. You haven't registered your mark locally. So I think it's all well and good to do something if you're a multinational under the Madrid Protocol because your brand is pretty much well known globally. If you are a smaller brand and you're probably only well known in 1, 2, or 3 jurisdictions, I would probably say do individual registrations in those jurisdictions to be 100% protected and know that if anything goes wrong, you can go to court locally in those jurisdictions. So if you are a smaller organization, I would recommend not doing the Madrid Protocol. But definitely, again, that's my observation. I also say this from my own experience, but by all means, you can also talk to IP lawyers directly in China to know what their opinions would be. Again, build your ecosystem. Talk to as many people as possible so you know what you should and shouldn't be doing. Is there a fast way to push a trademark through? My trademark is registered in the UK and US already. Does this help? No, it does not. The Chinese CTMO, they do not care where you have registered previously. What they care about is that you register locally. And you can sign up on a priority claim. It's just a question of whether that priority claim would be accepted or not. Generally, the timeline is between 12 to 18 months. I would say things are improving, that you can probably get it down to a 12, 13-month timeline versus an 18-month timeline for the entire process. So we've hit now 6:37. I'm going to stop it there. There are a lot of questions that came in. So I'm definitely going to email all of you that have questions left over. There's Charlotte, Ji Hong, and also Roderick. I will get to you directly later today with those questions, all right? I apologize for not reaching the time frame right now. Oh, I forgot to change that slide. But again, book a session. I put it in the chat section. I'm going to re-put it into the chat section again. If you want to book a strategy session with me, happy to do so. I'm going to answer your questions by email, but sometimes it's a lot easier to talk it through over a phone call than it is, just doing it by email. So definitely sign up for a session. Happy to meet with you and speak with you. Also, don't forget, we have 3 more sessions in this week. So tomorrow we will be talking about creating your Chinese marketing business model. This is reflecting companies that do not want to set up physical entities yet in China, but want to market in China. Then we're going to look on Wednesday about creating your distribution business model. So that's going to be a little bit more B2B related. And on Thursday, we'll be talking about creating your e-commerce business model. So if you're interested in those sessions, you can go to our events page on our website and register automatically there. I do want to thank everyone for joining. I appreciate you spending a little over an hour with me. I hope the information was helpful. And again, if you want to have a direct chat, don't hesitate to reach out to me for that. So I hope to see you again later on in this week, and I wish you all a very pleasant evening. Have a great afternoon, and goodbye.